Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. So what if Boris Johnson is the best the Tories can do now? Like, seriously, what if he is? He's been plotting the role of comeback kid for nearly 3 years now, but some Telegraph reporting would seem to suggest that Conservatives just don't want him back. So is this the general feeling amongst Conservative MPs, or an attempt by the Farage promoting Telegraph to block off the return of the one Tory leader who might challenge Toad of Toad Hall by being even posher and more outlandish? But first, for daily news and commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So has Boris Johnson blown his hasta la vista triumph? Well, there are really two big questions to be answered here where Boris Johnson's return is concerned. The first is whether he would in fact be the best option for Conservative leader. Tragically, he might actually be their best bet. The second question is, can he realistically come back now? I'm not considering whether or not Boris Johnson wants a return, because he's made it clear enough that he absolutely does, and I've seen no recent reports of him changing his mind. According to those close to him, his intention was to spend a couple of years making millions of pounds whilst Badenoch kept the seat warm for him, then a triumphant return to frontline politics in glory for the Tories. Hurrah! At least that's how it's working in his head. So ignoring for now what Conservative MPs think, we'll come back to that later, what are the options for leadership into the next election? Well, I'm obviously not privy to private conversations amongst Conservative MPs or influential figures within the wider party. But from what we could tell from reports, there are no new options emerging, which means that Conservative MPs basically have four choices. Kemi Badenoch remaining, or one of Robert Jenrick, James Cleverly, or somehow Boris Johnson replacing her. If there are any intellects amongst the new cohort, Badenoch has not given them the opportunity to shine because she's packed her front bench full of a mix of proven failures and half-wits. All four options are different enough that the choice of leader wouldn't be quite just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, but in order to make a sound decision on who should lead the party, the Conservatives need to decide how they want to make their comeback. They obviously can't do it by proving their competency, because they've lost their power to do so. And they're losing even more power in local government to Reform UK and the Lib Dems. That is likely to continue into next year at least. They also can't restore their reputation based on policies, because they don't have any which will work. Consider the big issue. So, the economy. They made a mess of the economy in power, and it wasn't just the post-COVID period. The economy shrank in real terms, along with people's incomes, from the beginning. People and public services were already worse off before we ever heard of COVID-19. Austerity is now very unpopular. So what do the Conservatives want to do about the economy, which is different to what they did do? They don't know. They're arguing about it. What do they want to do about Brexit? All they ever say on the subject is leave it alone. But their implementation of Brexit, even by the standards of Brexit supporters, has failed. They have to say how they would at least change their approach, otherwise they're promoting more failure. The NHS, transport, energy, taxation. All they're doing right now is saying to Labour, stop changing things. They've been out of power for nearly a year, yet all they've had to say on any policy is keep things the way we left them. And this is probably because the parliamentary party is fundamentally too divided to agree on anything. Kemi Badenoch is not leading the Conservatives. She's attempting to just steady the ship, not that that's working either. So Badenoch is showing no signs of charting a different course for the party. Robert Jenrick thinks he can make gains by just matching Farage on all of his policies. He thinks that if you couldn't squeeze a cigarette paper between the policies of Reform and the Tories, people will vote for the Tories as the only viable party to be able to implement those policies by winning an election. However, Jenrick's a little bit thick and he's missing a couple of factors. First, this will just cause more votes to be lost to the Liberal Democrats, and with the votes which the Lib Dems are gaining from Labour, that means Ed Davey's party could target way more seats at the next general election. Second, that Reform UK are ahead of the Tories in the polls, by quite a bit, and with enough of a share of the vote to maybe win a majority if things stay as they are. So the pragmatic vote right now is Reform UK for those who find both parties appealing, not the Conservatives. So Jenrick would be ruinous for them. Cleverly might have some better ideas, but his party is too divided for new ideas, and he's not a strong enough leader to impose his will on the party. So if the Conservatives cannot win their reputation back by proving themselves, and they won't be in a position to prove themselves, and they cannot win it back with bold, appealing policies, which sound very different because they're too divided, all they can possibly do is blather. And Boris Johnson is the absolute master of blather. When David Cameron won power in 2010, it was after several years completely changing the image of the Conservative Party. There was no attempt to talk about putting things back to how they were in 1997. It was all forwards looking. Hug a hoodie. Oh yeah, green energy, brilliant. It was, of course, all lies. But that's how he restored the Conservatives' reputation. If the Conservatives are not yet ready to make a clean break with their past and appear forward-looking, then I'm going to say that Boris Johnson probably is their best bet. I don't know whether Partygate would still be a major problem. I've not seen recent polling on that one. I suspect it would be. And Johnson's refusal to show any contrition will not help. But if the party doesn't want to unite around a positive rebranding of their image, they need a master of distractions. None of their current options in Parliament have got those gifts. Johnson is actually a pretty good match for Farage when it comes to being hopelessly entitled and privileged, yet somehow convincing ordinary people that he wouldn't be seen dead with socially, that he's one of them. He's all about the big, bold promises, and don't you worry your pretty little head about the details, because I've got really clever people working with me who've got it all sewn up, just like his oven-ready Brexit deal, which turned out to be a raw chicken that had been left out in the sun for 3 days. That being said, it's hard to imagine Johnson will be able to make a comeback, even if he's not been put off. And knowing his ego, he will still be convinced he can work miracles. But if the Telegraph article is accurate, and there isn't a great appetite amongst Tory MPs for him to return, it'll never happen. Because being realistic, the challenge of getting Boris Johnson back into Parliament is formidable. Let's consider all the steps which need to take place in order for Boris Johnson to become Conservative leader again. First, he would need to persuade a sitting MP in a very safe Tory seat to step down. They may have only just given up their job to become an MP like a year ago and are now being asked to stand aside. Mind you, if there was real impetus amongst the party to make it happen, I'm sure they would be compensated. Second, this would have to happen before Badenoch stepped down. Indeed, Badenoch would have to be in on the scheme because she would obviously block Johnson's candidacy on the ground she would be mad to invite her own assassin into Westminster. However, if Tory MPs wanted Johnson back, they could tell her, look, you're going anyway, but don't you want to piss on Jenrick's bonfire? Then maybe she would agree to help just to annoy her wayward shadow Home Secretary. Third, Johnson would still need to be selected by the local party members of the chosen constituency. To be certain, that could really severely limit the number of safe seats available. You would need a crossover on a Venn diagram of safe Tory seats, seats where the MP is willing to step aside, and seats where the local members believe in Boris Johnson. Fourth, Johnson would still have to win the by-election. That's risky. It is possible that no seat is truly safe for the Tories right now. Fifth, Johnson would still have to find himself in the final two of a leadership contest. He would need a good third of Tory MPs to back him just to get onto the final ballot. And finally, sixth, he'd need the wider party membership to believe he is their best bet. Now, some of these hurdles are easier to get over than others, but the cumulative effect of having to get over all six means a very, very difficult route back for Johnson. And absolutely impossible if there's not that many Tory MPs want him back. It's a very risky route back for the Conservatives because if it looks like they're even trying and they fail, it will be obvious that they have no confidence that a leader can emerge from the existing pool of MPs. In fact, worst case scenario for them is they try it, Johnson gets selected as a candidate for a by-election and then loses it. That would be disastrous not only for Boris Johnson's reputation, but for the Conservatives' reputation. So the Conservatives may actually be completely knackered, unable to work on a serious proposal to the public, unwilling to bring back the only leader with the personality to carry a deliberately unserious party, unless, of course, the Telegraph don't want Farage to be challenged by his more buffoonish alter ego and are browbeating Tory MPs into believing that the rest of them don't want Johnson back. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for listening. And until next time, I'll see you later.